Hey, everybody, it's Chris. I've got another interview for you today with the legendary Dr. Bernie Siegel. This is a personal thrill for me. I've been a fan of Dr. Siegel's work for a long time, and he has written a number of books. He's a medical doctor, and he was really is a pioneer in holistic medicine, taking really bringing this idea of looking at the whole patient, looking at their whole life, treating their whole life, bringing those concepts into conventional medicine. And he wrote a book in 1986 called Love, Medicine, and Miracles. And it's in my top must-read cancer books. It's in my Beat Cancer book club, which you can find at chrisbeatcancer.com/Amazon. These are other books besides mine that I think you should read. But anyway, Dr. Siegel's book's in there because it's so fantastic. And Dr. Siegel, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Let me give you a quote so you'll know what changed my career. You know, as doctors, we're not trained to take care of people. And I mean that literally. When you say to doctors, draw yourself working as a doctor, you'd be amazed at how many pictures have no patients in it. You have diplomas and books and desks, you know, your office. But I went to a workshop, I think it was with Carl Simonton, when he had written a book about imagery and other things for cancer patients. And I thought, oh, well, this will be for doctors. I'll go. It'll help me help my patients. And I got there, 150 people. I'm the only doctor in the room. It blew my mind. Everybody else was a cancer patient. The nice part I realized later was my cancer patients from my office came over and sat next to me. You know, that I wasn't making them feel worse or when they're going to die kind of a doctor. And one young lady, when I said to her, well, what brought you here? And she said, you're a nice guy. I feel better when I'm in the office with you, but I can't take you home with me. So I need to know how to live between office visits. That changed my whole approach to medicine, because I had my secretary send out letters to all our patients saying, you want to live a longer, better life, come to a meeting. You know, we'll teach you about survival behavior. That's where I was in a panic, because I said to the secretary, you forgot to say it's only for our patients. What if everybody brings 2 or 3 friends with cancer? What am I going to do with hundreds of, people? 12 women showed up. See, that taught me something too. That's why our group was called Exceptional Cancer Patients, because my wife, who was helping me, said, they're exceptional women. I said, all right, let's call it that, because I didn't have a name for the group. But that's when you begin to learn about survivors. They're willing to show up. They're not afraid of doing it wrong. There are people, you tell them, read my book. They say, I don't have time to read books. I'm busy. We're talking about your life. Yeah.
Yeah. This is true, and I love that concept of the exceptional survivor, which you coined. And when I read it, I was like, yes, exactly. You know, there are certain people that are wired for whatever reason. I call it they have the beat cancer mindset. They just have this unstoppable, unflappable determination to get well, and they're willing to turn their entire life upside down. They're willing to change their whole life. They're willing to read books. They're willing to research. They want to learn. They want to grow. And that was me in 2004, and still is me.
It isn't just about not dying.
Yes.
Let me enjoy the time I have left. Then you notice they don't die when they're supposed to. I mean, one that'll make you smile, I always have to tell this, is a man who had a few months to live, according to everybody. So he goes out to Colorado to die in the mountains because it's so beautiful. I told the family, call me for the funeral. I'm very close to him. I'll come out there. A year goes by, no phone call. So I call up to say, why do you ignore me? I have feelings too. I felt at that. He answered the phone and he said, it was so beautiful here, I forgot to die. And that's when I learned to go up to people I thought were dead and say, how come you didn't die when you were supposed to? I left my troubles to God. My landscaper friend went home to make the world beautiful, who refused chemo. He became my therapist, and I mean that, because he was so involved in beautifying the world and how beautiful it was to be in nature. I used to spend time with him. He was my therapist, and he lived to 91.
That's amazing. Well, you know, the revelation that I had was the way you're living is killing you. That was my personal conviction, my personal revelation. And there's a lot to unpack there, right? And I know you understand these things, but you know, it's like if you're willing to assume that everything you're living for, right, and everything you're focused on is probably detrimental to your health, or a lot of it is, then you also realize, okay, I've got to completely shift my life focus, right? I've got to focus on joy and happiness and health and love, and focus on all these wonderful things, and forget about cancer, forget about dying. Like, let's just focus on living.
Yes. If you have the courage to do it. I mean, a lawyer I know quit his law practice, picked up his violin, got a job in an orchestra, and years later, he's what he wanted to be, a violinist. So the first rule, because I was amazed how many people did this, I put a sign on my refrigerator: let your heart make up your mind. So pay attention. When somebody says, you know, what job do you want? Where do you want to live? Who do you want to marry? Anything. What will make you happy? Not what do I think I should do? What will impress the neighbors? What will make you happy? Monday, we more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses. Okay? And it affects immune function, stress hormone levels, all those things. So make sure you pay attention to your heart. When troubles happen, say, God is redirecting me. Something good will come of this. So you learn from them. And literally, the curse becomes a blessing because of what people do. And
I believe that 100%. And I have trained my...
Think of other people too. Because if you're doing what helps others, you feel good and they benefit. See, psychiatrists know more of this than oncologists and cardiologists, because if you thought, oh, I'm going to die, I go to see a psychiatrist to help me handle it. And then the psychiatrist noticed you didn't die when you were supposed to. And they, you know, and they have studied these things. So they know that humor, laughter, what do they call it? Yeah, one wrote an article on an immune competent personality. AIDS patients taught him that, because he noticed there's a whole bunch of them that are doing beautifully. So he studied them, you see, and he could hand a list out to people of how to behave and how to act and do well. And also it's loving yourself. That's another thing that's such a key. I had one lady, I could tell stories and use up all your time, but
go for it.
She had polio as a child, so she didn't like her body because she had muscle wasting. Then she developed neurological disease and more is happening. And she said, I got undressed, laid down naked in front of a mirror and started loving my body inch by inch. She said, by that, I mean, I started on my toes and then worked my way up. Her disease went into remission. And that's why my patients at the hospital, this was the most fun. Oh, that's one of Siegel's crazy patients. Now that was a compliment. See, the nurses used to yell at me because my patients refused pain medication. I said, they're not in pain. Operate on them. How can they not be in pain? Because it was what they wanted to do. You see, you have radiation, no side effects. Oh, the machine's broken. I mean, this was a phone call from the radiation therapist. I thought the machine's broken. Then I saw your name in the chart. Oh, it's a crazy patient. So he said to her, how come you have no reaction to radiation? Oh, I get out of the way and I let it go to my tumor. Then a lady who was supposed to be dead in 2 months down in North Carolina, her relative told her to come up here because I make people well all the time. And that upset me, you know. I mean, for her to promise her neighbor, I mean, her relative something. But she came up, she had leukemia. I admitted her to the hospital. I called my oncologist friends, who now didn't mind working with me because they were having fun too. And so they came over and he said, you know, I agree with her doctor. She's got 2 months to live, but this is his quote. But I know you and your crazy patients, so I'll give her hope. In 6 weeks, she was in complete remission. And what I laughed at, his sense of humor, the chemotherapy, he said, will have no benefit in her type of cancer. He wrote a note, isn't chemotherapy wonderful? Because he gave her something, you know, he had to do something. So she thought she was being treated, and then she responded completely, complete remission. I told her to go home and walk down the street and drive her doctor crazy that she's not dead, and he has to keep saying hello to her, you know, in their small town.
Well, and these are the stories that I love to hear, and that patients love to hear as well. I mean, it's, you know, it's not the double-blind placebo-controlled trial that changes people's lives, right? It's the story of survival. It's these stories that they hear of someone else who has survived and thrived against the odds. That's what gives people this spark of hope that they need, right?
Doctors kill people with their words, literally. You take hope away. I mean, I know one man, and I got the family to sue the insurance company. He had cancer, but he developed cataracts. So his life became meaningless. He can't see a damn thing. The insurance company said, we're not paying for cataracts. You'll be dead in a few months. We don't want to waste the money. He literally went into bed the day he got that letter and was dead in 5 days. And I told the family, sue the insurance company. And they did, because those words killed him. They took his life away. So I've learned, you know, live your authentic life. And studies, now we have a lot of studies. One college student, his professor thought he was nuts, but I called the professor, said he's not nuts. He studied actors by giving them comedies and tragedies to act in. And he drew their blood while they were acting. And he showed the difference. If you're in a comedy, immune function is enhanced, all the benefits. And if you're in a tragedy, the opposite happens, and you're more likely to get sick, you know, have your heart attack, cancer, whatever. So those are things people have to understand. What we're talking about has a lot to do with feelings, but the feelings are science.
Yeah, there's so much science now on, you know, how our decisions and thoughts and actions impact our immune system and strengthen our health or make us more vulnerable to disease. Our, you know, our attitudes, our emotions, it's all connected. And for so many years that aspect of health was ignored. It still is ignored, unfortunately, in a lot of conventional medicine. But now at least we have studies to prove that it shouldn't be, right? So here's a question. I'd love to go back in time and ask you, how did you become who you are? What happened in your early medical career that got you thinking differently about how to care for patients, about the spirit, mind, body connection? Because I know you weren't taught this in med school.
It's the pain. I cared about people. I became a doctor because I liked people. And nobody taught me how to deal with people. It was all about disease. And what I didn't realize as it began to happen was what I call my cover-up period. Doctors have a higher suicide rate than the general population. Why? It gets painful to be a doctor. You can't cure everything. And I went to a workshop by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who became a big friend of mine. The first question she asked me was, Bernie, what are you covering up? I said, what are you talking about? She said, it's a white piece of paper. You used a white crayon. You didn't need a white crayon. It's white already. You added a layer. What are you covering up? And I realized it was all my feelings that I wasn't dealing with. And at home, I can't deny sharing a funny beginning, what made me do this. I painted a portrait of myself, but I was an artist. That's part of why I became a surgeon, to use my hands, because I didn't know artists earned a living when I was a kid. Or I probably never would have become a doctor just painted pictures. So at home, when I'd come back from the hospital in the evening, I would pick somebody out. And we had 5 kids and we had like 20 or more animals running around the house. We were a rescue site for animals, our home. So I'd come in, I'd pick somebody out. Well, one afternoon, I'm coming home. Every creature in the house is running away from the house. And I yelled out of the window of the car, "What's happening? Is there a fire in the house? What's going wrong?" "No, we don't want to pose for you. We're tired of sitting still." And I yelled, "All right, I'll paint myself. I'll put a mirror up." "Okay." And then they all turned around, went back in the house. Thank God they did that. It was therapeutic because I painted myself in a cap, mask, and gown, completely covered up. And I called it the High Priest. Now you'd say, why? What I learned from reading Jung, he said, monks shave their head as a means of uncovering their spirituality, a symbol. And I went and shaved my head in the 1970s, shortly after I had painted that portrait. And I was an embarrassment to my complete family because everybody had their hair down to their shoulders and I'm shaving my head. But I realized what I needed to uncover was my spirituality and help people to live and not just treat diseases. And so, yeah, the shaving of the head, the throwing away the cover-ups, and I uncovered who I was and began to deal with people. And thank God I met that young lady who said, I need to know how to live. I thought, wow, that gives me a way to help people. And so we started doing that.
And something else that I love about your story is that you clearly started paying more attention to your patients, and especially their survival stories and the way they were living their lives, than so many other doctors even today do. And the example I want to give you before you speak about this is that I've lost count of the number of times a cancer survivor has told me their story of healing, and they went to their doctor and their doctor was surprised. "Well, your tumors have shrunk, your tumors are gone, you look great, you know. Well, just keep doing what you're doing." And they just shuffle them out the door.
Never say, "What did you do?"
Right.
I learned to say, "How come you," I mean this literally. I would say to patients, "How come you didn't die when you were supposed to?" And I realized that everybody had a story. It could be, I got a dog, you know, I changed where I lived, I changed my job. Everybody had a story to tell me. Yeah, one multimillionaire, he introduced me at a speech down in Miami. I said to him, "You're dressed like a bum. How could you come like this to introduce me in front of this crowd?" He said, "When they tell you you're going to be dead in a short time, who cares what you wear?" I canceled the dress code at work. I told my employees to come in whatever you want. Don't worry about it. And then his wife got him to buy a house on the ocean and listen to my tapes, meditation tapes. And he lived for over 5 years when he was supposed to be dead in a couple of months. And he really changed his hospital because they knew damn well it was him, not anything they were doing. And that's the other thing I love. Every now and then you get a letter from an oncologist, got a book from Sloan Kettering, Healing Lessons. And I called the guy, I said, "What did I get this book for?" He said, "Oh, I wrote about you in it." So I'm looking through it and I come to a page where it says, "I want to thank Dr. Siegel." And I thought, I called him back. I said, "What are you thanking me for? I don't even know you." He said, "I'm thanking you for how you helped my wife with her cancer. I used to think you were nuts as a doctor, but then my wife got cancer and your tapes and books were in our living room every night. We used them." And his wife, didn't die. She went on living. And so he became my fan. And, and that's why in his book, I wanted to thank Dr. Siegel. I'm grateful to him. And I don't even know the guy. Yeah. But those are the kinds of problems I would get if you went to speak at Sloan Kettering or other cancer centers. And at Yale, I would say things and doctors would yell at me. There's a poem about a lady who has cancer. It's called Miss G. And in it, the doctor who examined her that day comes home and he says to his wife, cancer's a funny thing. Childless women get it, and men when they retire. It's as if there had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire. Now, what do you think the audience at Yale does? They yell at me. Siegel, just because it rhymes doesn't make it true. Those are the exact words of a doctor in the audience. I said, why would he write it if it wasn't his experience? You know? And those are the things you realize are true. And what I learned, and I ask you the same thing. How do you describe through one word what it's like to have cancer? What would you say you're going through? Lady said to me, failure. I said, well, what in your life fits failure? She said, well, my cancer, my body fit. I said, that's not my question. Oh, my parents committed suicide when I was a child. I must have been a failure as a child. She went home with a different outlook. Or somebody uses the word pressure. Then they realize what's going on in their life that's causing pressure. It ain't the disease, it's your life. So all those people were thankful. And I do it with myself. So I'd say, do it, you know, be your own doctor. Because when I was traveling all around the world giving lectures and being interviewed, I got out of bed one morning and I couldn't even stand up. I was so dizzy. So I said to myself, hey, dumbbell, why don't you act like your patient? What is it like? Well, the world is spinning around. Right. You need to slow down. You're doing too damn much. You can't keep running around the world. Boom. I treated myself, learned to say no and take it easy, and things worked out. Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't say no to this interview.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, yeah, for me, you know, it's hard to nail it down to one word, but there are many words. Like fear was a big one, but I wasn't living in fear before cancer. So really fear was after the diagnosis. That was the word for my life that I was really struggling with, was just this fear. But before the diagnosis, or what it uncovered for me, it was like, you know, insecurity and shame and weakness, vulnerability. And because I mean, for most of my life as a young man, you know, I was doing things to project an image of strength to the world around me when I felt very weak and vulnerable, and cancer exposed that for me. And it was like, it was in a way, it was humiliating, because I felt like now everyone will see how weak I really am. Right. Because now I'm weak on the outside too.
Right. Yeah.
So
we can keep learning from our troubles. They become therapy. Because more people have thanked me when they come up with a word. They don't even wait for me to say, how does that fit your life? They immediately go, oh, you know, they know what in their life is bringing that negative effect in. And the other part I love, I mean, which is kind of fun, are families who bring, you know, a lot of times their mother in. Oh, our mother, she's so neurotic, so afraid of everything, so this, so that. And then she gets diagnosed with cancer, and I talk to her, work with her. And then a few months later, I'd get a phone call. Dr. Siegel, what is it? You got to help with the mother. What's the matter? She's crazy now. She's not afraid of anything. She's, you know, flying airplanes, jumping out of things. I mean, they had a list where the mother's life was at risk, you know, and they were now worried about their mother. Whereas before, they couldn't get her to go out in the rain, you know? And, but those changes make a difference. And even my partners in my office, they would say, hey, Bernie, come in here. You're interested in this stuff. Because their patients, their cancers would disappear. And they'd say, tell Dr. Siegel what you did. And then I'd hear their story. And I was running support groups every week. So, you know, I worked with the people, meditation, changing lives, all those things. And you know what's interesting? See, men do have a poorer survival rate than women with cancer, because men are into, oh, I can't work anymore. What's the point of living? I mean, I've had men say that when their wife and children are sitting in the room. There's no point in living. I can't work. And then there was one lady who was such a classic. I have 9 children. I can't die till I'm all married and out of the house. 20 years later, I got a call. My 9th child has left home. I couldn't believe she was still alive 20 years later. You know, the cancer came back. That's what, as a doctor, blew my mind. How the hell do you control cancer for 20 years and then it comes back? Women with the same cancers as men do live longer. Though most doctors, you know, say, oh, it must be their hormones, it must this, it must that. No, it's their attitude towards life.
Yeah, you know, I talk about this often, is that having a strong will to live is critical, but also being very specific about what you have to live for.
Right.
Like, what do you need to live for? Who do you need to live for? And for patients that can't find the answer, yeah, inevitably, yeah, they do end up typically not doing very well, not living very long if they don't have a reason to live. And for older folks, that's okay. Like, it makes sense. They've lived a long life, and they feel like they've accomplished everything. They've raised children, they've enjoyed grandchildren, they've had a career, whatever. But it is tragic when it's someone that's younger or even middle age, and they feel, you know, like they've lost their purpose in life or never discovered their purpose.
Yeah. I mean, in our family, because of the work I was doing, and people, you know, knew they couldn't avoid me and all I was doing, death has not been a problem. When people got tired of living, they would make an announcement. You know, I mean, my father-in-law was 98, and I said, you got to live to be 100. I want to get you on television. See, that's the trouble with families. He's ready to die, and his son-in-law doesn't want him to die. He wants him to live another 2 years. And he said no, because he'd been through a lot with his body. He said, I'm not having dinner and I'm not taking my pills. And he went to sleep permanently. And I got some great advice from him, because part of his problem, he fell and injured his spinal cord. So I said to him, what advice do you have to seniors? He said, tell them to fall on something soft. A week or so later, I'm visiting him in a nursing home, and he said, what I told you doesn't always work. I said, what do you mean? He said, they stood me up in therapy. I fell over on my wife and broke her leg. So tell them to just fall up. Literally, that's what I put on his headstone when he died. He just fell up, because it was so simple. I'm not going to have dinner. I told the nurses he's going to die tonight. You know, they look at me like, how do you know? And he did. And my mother-in-law, she was an opera singer. I mean, I could tell you some mystical stuff too, but, and I used to visit with her when she had lunch and get her to sing for people, even though she was in her 90s, incredible voice. And I was at religious services. I saw a cloud, literally, like the size of a pillow that you slept on. A cloud entered the door, went up in the air and over my head in the synagogue. And I heard my mother-in-law say, goodbye, Bernie. And then the cloud went out. I jumped up and drove down to the nursing home where she was. I walked in the door and the nurse said, oh, you heard. She had died 15 minutes before. I said, I didn't hear. She came and told me goodbye. And the same is true. I mean, my father, he said, I need to get out of here. My mother said, help him out of bed. I said, Ma, he's talking about his body. So we said, you want to leave your body? Yes. When? Sunday. all right, we'll have a party Sunday afternoon, then you can go. And 25 people showed up. He waited for them and then died with a big smile on his face, because my mother was telling stories about how they met, which started with my father losing a coin toss and having to take my mother out. So he died looking so healthy. I thought, you screwed up. He's going to say, everybody come back next week. This is a lot of fun. But when the last visitor came in, he took a breath and died. And again, they're grandchildren, but there's no fear in it. You know, I mean, the kids really came over to me and said, is this what dying is like? I mean, they were there in a panic in a hospital room, and it was a beautiful moment. And I hear stories. You see, that's another thing I tell people. Don't hide your mystical events. Because if you talk about them, people may say, like I was the controversial Dr. Siegel, but you're more likely to call me to talk when you have something happen. So tell people you're a little crazy. Then they tell you about their being crazy. And it works wonderfully. I mean, the mystical nature of life. We don't die. I know that. I mean, our spirit goes on, our bodies die. I have had a near-death experience choking on a toy when I was a kid. I mean, lots of things have happened to me. Somebody said to me over the phone, why are you living this life? Because she was yelling at me for being so busy. And I went into a trance and saw myself with a sword in my hand. I said, wow, maybe that's why I'm a surgeon. I mean, all these things have happened to me, and I don't deny them, and I tell them to people. But at the hospital one day, this woman said, can you talk to me, please? I said, what is it? She said, I just had a heart-lung transplant, and everybody thinks I'm crazy, but I know I can talk to you. I said, what is it? She said, the first thing was when I woke up from surgery and they said, what do you want to eat or drink? I said, chicken McNuggets and beer. And then I said, I've never had those. Where did that come from? But then she said, a few days later in a dream, a young man came to me, told me his name, said, we're together forever. And I knew he was my donor. I called, you know, the office at the hospital, said, what's her donor's name? Because it was at Yale. And they said, we're not allowed to give out that information. It's personal. So I called her family and said, look at all the obituaries in the New England area. And we came across his name. And he had died in a motorcycle accident. He loved chicken McNuggets and beer. And the woman had ridden a motorcycle when she got out of the hospital. And the family said, oh yeah, that's his birthday, the day you chose to ride a motorcycle. And she wrote a book about it. Yeah, it's called A Change of Heart by Claire Sylvia. I mean, you know, the hospital staff may say she's crazy. I'm saying incredible, amazing. And some of my patients were mystics, and they brought me messages from dead patients, and they knew their names, what they said. Nobody ever said to me, that's crazy. That is not true. And that includes my own family that I've gotten called and told, you know, that they're doing okay. And here's your message.
When you wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles, that was your first book, right? And
Yes.
I know you were met with quite a bit of controversy. And what was that like, you know, coming out with this message of hope and encouragement and empowerment for patients?
I'll tell you what the key to life is: your parents loving you. If I were in charge right now, I would pass a law that said to every parent, you must sign up for the class on how to bring up your child to feel loved. Not a law on you can't buy a gun unless you're 18 or 21. Because if your kid grows up with love, he's not going to run out to buy a gun. And that's what we have to learn. If kids grow up with love, what a difference it makes. And let me give you a statistic. See, medical. Harvard students were asked, did your parents love you? This was a couple of decades ago, a study was done. If they said, no, my parents didn't love me, 98% had suffered a major illness by middle age. If they said, yes, my parents loved me, 24% had suffered a major illness by middle age. And that impressed the hell out of the doctors doing that study. And the same thing with a lot of psychiatrists used to tell me, you're crazy, you're crazy. And then they would set up studies to prove I'm crazy, you know, like support groups and other things. And they realized, I got the same results as Siegel. He's not crazy. Then they became my biggest supporters. Yeah.
We know that support is important, but I found that in some cancer support groups or many support groups, they're not guided well. And so it just becomes sort of just a place where people get together and complain.
Yeah, I got the worst cancer. No, mine is much worse than yours. Yeah, there is that group of people. What I learned also, because when I drew pictures for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I couldn't believe all the things she knew about me from drawing an outdoor scene. Even things like numbers and colors. Bernie, why'd you draw 11 trees? Oh, I've been doing this work with cancer patients 11 months. I mean, as soon as she'd ask me a crazy question, yeah, and colors have meaning, you know, red is emotional. When people are ready to die, you get the purple balloon or kite with their name on it going up in the sky. So all these things were meaningful. And I had the group members read books, and my book after I wrote it, if they wanted to come and draw a picture, an outdoor scene and something about their life. It could be getting chemotherapy, going to the operating room. I mean, there are people who drew the devil giving their poison, and they drew people with God giving them chemotherapy. So yeah, who did I say, don't worry, you won't have any side effects? The person having it from God. And the others, I'd say, you got to change your image. And the doctors realized that too. So they became my supporters at the hospital. But it was through the use of the drawings and words and different things that I began to realize how much a person's life is integrated into their health. I mean, I was just thinking a few minutes ago about it. My wife was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis many, many years ago. We had 5 kids. She was exhausted. I knew it had a role in it. And the neurologist is telling me when she's going to die and how I'm going to be left with 5 kids. And he told me in the hospital cafeteria, and I'm sure he did that, so I can't react. I'm not going to get emotional in the hospital cafeteria. But he's the one, in a sense, by being so negative, that got me to look at what else can I learn about healing. So I was president for a while, the American Holistic Medical Association, because I began meeting intelligent doctors who were talking about alternative means of treatment. Now, a lot of them aren't alternative anymore because they became scientific and worked. And, you know, my wife outlived every prediction from every doctor. I mean, she died 4 years ago of some heart problems, but she had a small breast cancer, and that never meant anything, never showed up. I mean, she was a good example. I mean, even being a human being, she had a wonderful sense of humor. That taught me something about the benefits of humor. That became a part of my presentations. But the day she was going to have local excision of her breast cancer, the anesthesiologist came in, and this is at Yale, so he knows me and has worked with me, and he wants to impress me. He's going to take good care of my wife, and he's got all his files, and he's looking handsome. And my wife looks up at him and says, "My, you're quite a handsome fellow." He melts. He sits down, puts his charts aside, and is on a date with my wife. You know, but she was so good at doing things like that, you know. And after about 15 or 20 minutes, I finally said, "Excuse me, I have to break up your date. We're here for surgery." And they both stared at me like, oh my God. they forgot what they were behaving like. They were like the boy and girlfriend. Yeah. And so then she went in for surgery. But she was so good at it that I could teach people to have a sense of humor, even to write a note on your body. They uncover you for surgery, and you have a line that says "cut here," or "it's the right side, stupid." Things like that patients would write with magic markers on there, and the surgeons would laugh. They knew Siegel had something to do with it, but they'd laugh. And the cardiologists also learned how mystical life was, because I talked to people and played music in the operating room, and they would say, they're anesthetized. What are you doing? It's a waste of, but the patients hear you. See, we hear when we're sleeping, or we wouldn't wake up with an alarm clock. So you hear when you're anesthetized too. So I would talk to people, play music for them, and it's always hard for me not to remember the funny things. You're operating and you hear the patient say, is everything all right? Why are you asking? Listen to your music. Frank Sinatra is singing All of Me. Why not take all of me? We had other things like that would play. And I wouldn't hear them because I was intensely involved in the surgery. You know what I mean? I wasn't listening to the music. But the patients would get a kick out of it and interrupt me to point out what was playing. But when you play children music, I did a lot of pediatric surgery. If you play children music, it hypnotized everybody, because all the staff thought about their childhood and became cheerful and friendly and smiling, which they weren't when you were taking care of adults, and it worked beautifully. See, the mind is so powerful. Our kids used to get upset with me because they'd hear me say, oh, I lie to children all the time. They'd say, Dad, why do you lie to your patients? I said, to help them. And what I explained is I'm trying to hypnotize them in a positive way. So, and I would tell everybody, do this. You'll see how powerful it is. You take an alcohol sponge and you say, it's really nice. They've made new sponges now. It numbs your skin as well as cleaning it. And the kids would say, oh boy, that was great. I didn't feel anything. Why don't the other doctors use it? Every now and then a kid would say, I felt it, but they didn't say it hurt. You know what I mean? I felt it. Yeah. Oh, well, bad sponge. Say, it was never my fault. Then I'd throw it out. But that's the part, as I say, that impressed me. For their benefit, you could lie to them. And then patients would come in and tell me stories at home. My mother had chemotherapy, was nauseated and vomiting, and she said, get me my Compazine. I need to take one. So I brought her a pill, and she took it and felt fine. A few hours later, she said, I need another one. I brought it to her. She had her glasses on this time. She looked at the pill. She said, this is my anticoagulant Coumadin. Why are you bringing this? Well, it had a C, and I thought that was the Compazine. But it cured her the first time. As her daughter said to her, Ma, it worked last time. And that's how powerful our minds are. So when you're helping people have that positive outlook, yeah, you're damn right. More of them are going to survive, and their bodies are not going to respond with all kinds of side effects. Even now, with the COVID thing, the people who are in a panic about the vaccine, you're damn right. You'll have a reaction when you go get it because you've prepared your body. Oh, I'm worried about that. I'll have a reaction. So when you go, your body says, okay, here's your reaction. But if you said, no, I don't have reactions to vaccines, they're no problem, you don't. So I try to get people to train themselves and their bodies to do well.
And what you're talking about, obviously, the power of belief, the placebo effect and the nocebo effect, which believing something's going to harm you can actually increase the harm that it can cause, as well as can believing something that will help you can create that same healing benefit or helpful benefit even without the intervention.
So many patients where I would get intensely involved discussing something about their care and pick up the knife and make an incision. And I always remember in one case, the nurse waving frantically. And I'm looking at her like, what's the matter? And then she pointed that I hadn't used the anesthetic at all. I hadn't injected it. And I had cut into this fellow. And I said to him, any problems with the surgery I'm doing? He had a tumor on his arm. He said, no, we're fine. I'm not having a problem. So we kept talking. I finished the surgery. And then I told him he was hypnotized and he'd be a good, candidate for hypnosis if he ever has more surgery, because I did the whole thing and never injected him with any local anesthetic. And one classic, just again to show you how powerful things are. I'm operating, anesthesiologist says, Bernie, patient's heart stopped. I can't get it going again. I'm going to call the morgue and get transportation for him to be taken there. I yelled out, Jimmy, it's not your time yet. Come on back. This is me yelling in the operating room. What happens? His heart started beating again. And he recovered completely.
That's awesome. I love it. I'm going to have to remember that line.
I loved, you see, just what you said, the anesthesiologist said, I love working with you. But, all these things I had read, crazy stories that have happened to people, I thought, what the hell? I might as well try too. Yeah.
It's worth a try. We've got a few minutes left and I want to be respectful of your time, but I'd love for you to share what you would tell a cancer patient, what you think cancer patients need to know. Of course, we want them to read Love, Medicine, and Miracles, but what are the most important things, practical things that a cancer patient needs to know about the journey, about life, about the process?
Yeah.
Like, what's at the top of mind for you?
I had a set of questions people had to fill out to join our group. One thing I'd say to them is, what's going on in your life now? Like, why did you get cancer now, not 10 years ago or 10 years from now? What's happening in your life? So they would know what made them more vulnerable to be sick at this time, whether it's cancer, heart attack, multiple sclerosis, anything. I would get them to draw pictures for me. Draw yourself, your disease, your treatment, and your immune system eliminating the disease. See, not killing. You don't have to fight. And I'll tell you why that's important. A Quaker, conscientious objector, told by his oncologist, Dave, I'm going to kill your cancer. Dave said, I don't kill anything, and walked out of the office and went home and died of his cancer. See, what if the doctor said to him, Dave, I'm going to get you well? I'm sure he would have taken the chemo. What he did was go home and do a lot of prayers and other things. He did last 10 years doing his things. And when he drew a picture for me, he drew his white cells carrying cancer cells away, not hurting them. Let's get these duds out of here. That was his picture. But the doctor screwed him up. I'm going to kill your cancer. I don't kill anything. Goodbye. Yeah. He could have said, I'm going to make you well. And he would have had the same treatment with no problems. So it's making sure that it's your choice, that you're doing what makes you happy, not what's imposed upon you. And as the other is, look at what's going on, as I said, in your life. Monday morning, we have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses. So if a life has been imposed upon you, rebirth yourself. Start a new life in your body. The other is having faith. We've had people who said, I left my troubles to God. That's her quote. Because one of my partners, my partners were also taking care of my crazy patients with me. And one of them yelled, Bernie, come in here. You're interested in this stuff. He said she had cancer of the pancreas. It was a big lump. You could feel it. It's gone. So I asked her what she did. She said, I left my troubles to God. But it's the peace that came to her with that. And I'm laughing because there's some families that would call me up and tell me that the kids would say, my mother is going crazy. Now that she has cancer and you've told her to do all these things she loves, she's not afraid of anything anymore. She never used to even go out in the rain. Now, she's skydiving and doing all kinds of things. Yeah, but then mama doesn't die of cancer. She's having a wonderful new life. So maybe that's the best way of saying it. Rebirth yourself. If you're not happy with your life, start a new life. Be born again. Yeah.
That's a great message. There's so much wisdom in there, and it's just awesome to hear you echo the same sentiments that I share, and I've learned a lot from you, and so I am carrying the torch that I don't know if you lit it or if you just carried it through the 80s and 90s and are still, who knows, but it's awesome.
Yeah, because I grew up with loving parents. I mean,
I did too.
Me, which drove me crazy as a kid, was, Ma, I had a horrible day in school. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this. Ma, did you hear what I said? I have to make a decision. Do what makes you happy. And we were here to help others. That was the meaning of life. So I never found my parents very helpful. I mean, I know that sounds funny, but I spent more time talking to God than I did to my parents. Because, when you had a problem and God is redirecting you, I'd go sit in my bed and say, hey, God, what is going on here? My parents are no help. Can you tell me what's that? Yeah. I always shut the bedroom door, because if somebody came in and said, who are you talking to? I'm not going to say God. Then they say, you need a psychiatrist, right? So
I have no problem talking to God. I don't mind if anybody knows it.
But I realized how lucky I was with those parents. When you look at the studies of kids who don't grow up with love and what happens to them. Yeah.
But we should mention that can still be overcome.
Yes. Well, I reparented people. Oh boy, that's a whole other subject we can meet on. In the office one day, a young lady said to me, you're my CD. I said, what the hell are you talking about? You're my chosen dad. And she woke me up, because suicidal people were calling me to say, do you have Jack Kevorkian's phone number? I want to be dead. I'm being abused by my father and all. I said, no, wow. I don't have his phone number, but I'll be your father. I love you. So I became a CD or a BD. That's a bonus or a chosen. And there are a number of people alive today because I'm their new father. And boy, are they wonderful. I always say you get more cards and love from them than your own kids. But it just touches you so that you made a difference in somebody's life. And it's hard not to give example. A kid falls into a fireplace on Christmas Day. I had taken out her sister's appendix, so the family called me to treat her burns. And she's screaming at me, I hate you, because it hurt. The mother said to me, which I don't remember, one day you said to her, maybe someday you'll love me. I'm sure I must have said that, because that sounds like my personality, with the kid screaming at you, I hate you. Years go by. She comes into the office one day with a turtleneck sweater, long sleeves. I said, Madeline, it's 90 degrees outside. What the hell are you doing? She said, I'm ugly. And I don't want people to see my scars. She said, I need to get a job. Can you help me? I said, well, I know some nursing homes where I can probably get them to hire you. So I called them, because I knew the one would put her in a uniform that showed the scars around her neck and arms, because she had fallen straight in and put her arms out to hold her face up above the fire. So she went there, they gave her the job. back in the office. Well, Madeline, how'd the job go? Nobody noticed my scars. I said, Madeline, when you're given love, you're beautiful. I don't know how many more years go by. The phone rings. Dr. Siegel. Yes, Madeline. My father died a few years ago and I'm getting married. Would you be my father at my wedding? And good old, what's his name? Through the years, you never let me down. You turned my life around. Remember the singer, male, I can't remember his name, but they played that song while we danced. And what a gift. I mean, you think about that in your lifetime. Even if one person said to you, thank you, you've turned my life around. Yeah. Keep loving others. Yeah. I mean, I wrote that to USA Today when Trump was elected and they published my letter. I thought it was wonderful. I said, anytime you have a problem with Donald Trump, just say, Donald, I love you. He won't know what to do with you.
With anybody. It's good advice if you have a problem with anybody, isn't it?
Let me see. I have a book everybody should read, 365 Prescriptions for the Soul. That's about life. So every day you read another page. We're on Cape Cod. Where do you live again?
I'm in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay. I'm on Cape Cod, summertime, traffic horrendous. Car pulls up behind me. Teenager starts cursing and screaming at me as if it's my fault that there's all this traffic. I said to a cop on the corner, tell him to be quiet. I mean, he's screaming obscenities and everything. And the cop, I couldn't believe it, said, that's not my job. Hey, he's directing traffic. He's not going to tell this kid to be quiet. So I got out of the car with our kid screaming he could have a gun. I walked over to his car window, which is halfway down. I said, I want to tell you something. I love you. I'm sorry your parents don't. He shut down completely, made a U-turn, and drove away. And my hope is always he drove home to talk to his parents. And I've done this on the street more than once with wild, crazy people who you don't know if they're on drugs, have a gun, with them. I've just said, I'm sorry for what's happening in your life. I want you to know I love you. And they've always stopped, turned and walked away. And boy, did the people in the street thank me, because they're all peeing in their pants, wondering what's going to happen. With all the stories we're reading. What if somebody in one of the schools said, I love you? Instead of trying to lock the doors, I love you. Love is a weapon. Don't forget it. But I don't mean that in a negative way. It's a powerful weapon. And the people, whether it's Adolf Hitler or Vladimir Putin, I mean, they didn't grow up with love, or they wouldn't be treating everybody this way.
That is such an incredible sentiment and message. And I'm so thankful for you, Dr. Siegel. You've inspired countless people, millions of people, I imagine, with all of your books. And again, I want to encourage everyone to read Love, Medicine, and Miracles first. Read that one. Yep. And Dr. Siegel has a bunch more. You might get hooked. He's got a book called Faith, Hope, and Healing. He's got a book of miracles, The Art of Healing. He's got a lot of books about this and a lot of wisdom. And where can people find you online?
The BernieSiegelMD.com is my website. And there they see the list of books. The meetings that we have are listed there with phone numbers to call in, and various CDs that people can listen to. So if they're going through surgery, chemo, life, things that prepare them for it and can make a difference.
You were talking about love being a weapon, which I agree is an incredibly powerful weapon. And we need more love in the world. And
I have literally found, as I said, gave you examples of how wonderful it is to say to people, I love you. And when people have come in with family problems and I say, just say I love you, they look at me like, what are you, nuts? But when they do it, then they come in smiling and say thank you. And let me say, there's also appropriate anger in terms of defending yourself. You know, that's very different than violence. So if they're not treating you with respect, you have a right to speak up. You know, not shoot them or stab them or drive a car over them, but to say, you're not treating me with respect. And you can say that to your parents and others too. Maybe this is the best closing. I admired one of our kids. You'll have a smile. We had 3 boys. I told my wife I want a daughter to take care of me when I get old. And she did not want to go through pregnancy again, but I kept pestering her and she said, all right, I'll try one more time. She learned she was going to have twins. And my wife did stand-up comedy to get people to understand the benefits of humor. You know, it's part of I talk for a couple of hours, but she'd be the intermission to get them to relax and laugh. And she said, if it's 2 more boys, I'm not coming home from the hospital. Thank God the first one out was a girl.
That's great.
The day after Christmas. So we called her Carolyn because we were listening to Christmas carols. But her brother, Keith, he's amazing. One day, he came up to me, age 7, said, I need an x-ray. And this is the part, see, I've learned about that intuitive nature from people. Some of them come in and know they have cancer or don't. You know, the test, they'll let you do, but they know. And he said, I need an x-ray. I said, if you hurt your leg, take a hot bath. I need an x-ray. And when a 7-year-old tells me I need an x-ray, I got an x-ray. And sure enough, he had a bone tumor. And what was my feeling? I'm delaying things by talking to him about taking a hot bath. And now he's going to lose his leg and die of cancer. And I mean, you know, you can imagine how you feel as a father with all that guilt. I come home. I get all the kids to quiet down, in essence, to know your brother's going to be dead in a year. The next day he comes to me. He said, Dad, can I talk to you a minute? Remember, this is a 7-year-old. I said, what is it? You're handling this poorly. We want to have fun today, and you want us in our room depressed. And boy, he is such a good therapist. I said, all right, tell everybody, go out in the yard and have a good time. It turns out he had a rare, extremely painful, benign tumor. So he taught me. And the second lesson he taught me was coming to me, because this is something you see kids and others need to say. You're not treating me with respect. You're not taking care of me. He comes to me one day. Can I talk to you for a minute, Dad? Yeah, what is it? You don't love me as much as my brother. I said, what are you talking about? You have 5 children. We should each get 20% of your time. Jeffrey's getting 40. I said, Jeffrey's driving us crazy, so he gets 40. You know, you're no trouble. So you're the hallway with the last bedroom, and we don't worry about what you're doing in the bedroom. Jeffrey's bedroom is off the kitchen, so we know we can watch him all the time. You know, I explained to him that I love you. But I thought, wow, that is really something for a pipsqueak to come up to you and say, you don't love me enough. You're not giving me as much time. How many kids have the courage to do that? And he's the sweetest, gentlest guy you ever want to meet. He became a massage therapist. He does home care. You know, he's into all kinds of therapy. And I may say, and he doesn't live right next door. He's an hour or so away. But there were times when I needed massages, he'd come down. And it was incredible to have your child massage you. I would go into a trance. And that reminds me of one other story I got to tell you too.
Please.
My mother had hypothyroidism. She was told, that's why I always compare myself to Jesus and the parenting issues. My mother was told, don't have a child. You could kill yourself with pregnancy because you're so depleted due to your hypothyroidism. But my mother had a mother who said, I want a grandchild. So my mother went ahead and became pregnant and she was wiped out completely. She had no strength, couldn't deliver the baby when she went into labor. So they finally said to her, you're not going to survive a cesarean section. We just have to pull that kid out with the forceps. And so they did. And my mother, to make it a short story, said, they didn't hand me a child, they handed me a purple melon. That's how battered I must have been from the weeks of labor. See, in the family album, there's a covered carriage photograph. I thought I was sleeping. You know what I mean? You look at it when you grow up, okay, the kid's sleeping, they're covering. But then I said to her, how did I survive if nobody was touching me and you're hiding me? Because at that point, I had medical knowledge and I didn't know how the hell I made it. And she said, oh, my mother took you, poured oil all over you and pushed everything back where it belonged 4 and 5 times a day. I realized I was the most loved kid on the planet. Grandma's massaging me. Because we know that kids who aren't touched can develop infections, don't develop a brain, all these things. Then, and why people need to understand this, our life is stored in our bodies. 50 years later, my wife and I went for massage regularly because it was good therapy for her and me. That day, the massage therapist said, I'm so busy today, I can't do both of you. But my wife is a therapist, she's here, could she do one of you? I said, my wife loves you and your coarse hands and so forth, so let your wife massage me. I lie down, wife starts working on me. Now, by then, I had a shaved head. See, I uncovered my life in the 70s. I painted my covered up self in 1976. But before the 70s were over, I had shaved my head and become uncovered. So I go and lie down, woman's hands, oil on, my infant-like head, a bare head. I became that infant again. I realized how those memories were stored in my body. It was incredibly wonderful experience. But when I opened my eyes, everything changed. The room was filled with dozens of people. I said, what the hell are you doing here? I'm getting a massage. The husband was at the foot of the table. He said, we thought you had a stroke or a heart attack. You were gone. We couldn't communicate with you. I said, yes, you don't know my life history. I became an infant again. It was like my grandmother's hands. I was having a wonderful time, but I was a newborn. I couldn't talk to you.
Wow.
You see, things happen. You can't deny them. So when I have something like that happen to me, I don't know if I'll ever get the book published, but I have a title for a new book, Life, Mystery, and Miracles. Just all the things that have happened to me and other people.
I hope you do. I hope you do get it published and finish it.
If you stop interviewing me, I'll have time.
Well, thank you. You've been so generous with your time. I could talk to you all day. You have so many incredible stories and wisdom to share. It's just been such a personal treat for me. I know how much my audience is going to love this interview, and I appreciate you so much, Dr. Siegel.
Because people listen to stories and don't get mad at stories. That's why I became a storyteller. I'm not going to fight over statistics. I just tell you a story.
I love it.
All right.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for watching. Thank you again, Dr. Siegel. Please share this video with people you care about. There's a lot of wisdom in it. If you made it this far, you know. So thanks again for watching. Subscribe to my channel, and I will see you on the next one.
Bless you. Thank you.